Welcome to the Empire Builders podcast. I'm Dave Young. That's Stephen Semple sitting to your right. I don't know, however you're facing your podcast listening device. As we normally do, Stephen whispered the topic into my ear just as the countdown thing was going, and I'm a little flustered and confused because I'm not sure what we're talking about. He said we're going to talk about the Rocky franchise, and literally the first thing that came to my mind was Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Oh, no, not Rocky and Bullwinkle.
And I'm like, really? That's an empire? Really?
No.
No, you're talking about Sylvester Stallone. And,
I'm talking about Sylvester Stallone.
Yo, Adrian, and all of that.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. That movie is almost 50 years old. Came out in 1976. There's been 5 Rockies. There was then Rocky Balboa. There's been 3 Creeds. There's another Creed coming out.
Really?
There's plans for a prequel to be done on like one of the streaming ones. There's a spin-off that's being talked about to be done on Drago. Remember the Russian fighter?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like when you go to Philadelphia, there's the Rocky statue in Philadelphia of him, holding his hands up near the stairs that he ran up. And today there is a lineup. There's a lineup of people to take their picture with that statue. And it's 50 years ago. 50 years ago. Amazing.
Well, Sylvester Stallone, he's got to fund his retirement somehow.
The story was first shared with me by Tony Robbins. And it blew me away. And I did a little bit of additional look into it. Like, is this an urban legend? And it turns out much of this is true, although some of the details, I don't know the exact numbers. But it is actually really speaks to Sylvester Stallone's determination and understanding and ability to get things done that I believe every entrepreneur needs to embrace and understand. And that's why I wanted to talk about Rocky. One of the other things I want to talk about when it comes to Rocky, it won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Film Editing. It's considered by many one of the greatest sports films of all time. Stallone was nominated for Best Actor and also was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in Creed. And it's wild today that when you're at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, you still see people who run up the stairs and do the whole thing. And as I said, the statue is there and there's a lineup. There's a lineup to take your picture with the Rocky statue. And yes, I have a picture of myself with the Rocky statue. I had to do it.
How long was the line?
Actually, I was there during the week on a weekday, so it was not too bad. It was probably about 15 minutes. But here's the story behind Rocky that I find remarkable. So Sylvester Stallone found himself, like many in Hollywood, wanting to be an actor. And he was a struggling actor. He not a good-looking guy, kind of mumbles in his speech, had a really, really hard time finding roles. Like, look, the other part is what's amazing is hearing him speak today versus how he used to speak. Like, he's worked hard to become also a better actor. But let's go back to the early days. So he's struggling to do all those things. He's flat busted broke, and he can't make his way into getting the types of roles that he wants. He just basically gets roles as tough guys and all this other stuff. So what he decides to do, so think about this for a moment. He says, I can't break in. I could give up, I could keep trying, or, and this is the reason why Tony Robbins talks about him, I could try a different approach. So here's what he decides to do. He says, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to write a movie that I star in. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn. So he goes on this journey of learning screenplay writings, and he writes the movie Rocky and starts shopping it around. He's going down this path of doing this. Now, here's where the real determination comes in. Here's how broke he is. He reaches a stage where he has so little money, he has to sell his dog.
Oh, man.
He sells his dog because he just has no money. But at the same time, one of the movie companies comes along and says to him, we'll take your movie. We'll give you a check. I believe the closest I found was it was like $250,000 plus some royalties, things like that, which when you've got nothing.
In 1974 or 5, whenever that was, right?
When you've got nothing, That is life-changing money.
Yeah.
But he's not going to star in the movie. He's not going to be in. They'll maybe give him a minor part, but he's not going to star in the movie.
Yeah.
And guess what he does? He says, no.
My goal was to be an actor. Yeah.
Now think about the strength that it would take to do that. You're flat busted broke. You've sold your dog. Somebody's giving you this amount of money that's life-changing money, still going to make your movie, but you're not going to star in it.
Yeah.
How many of us would say no?
They'd be like, oh, well, okay, I'll take the money.
I'll take the money.
Right.
Yeah. Most people would say yes. Few would say no. He says no. Holds to his guns. So they continue to go back and forth and go back and forth and go back and forth on it. And he finally finds a place that'll take the movie. They'll say, yeah, we'll take the movie. We're going to do it as a low-budget film. It'll probably do okay because it's got this boxing thing. We'll let you star in the movie.
In your own movie.
Yeah. In your own movie. But we're going to give you significant less money. Like they really dropped down the amount of money they're going to give him. But he was okay with that because he was like, look, it's not about the money. It's about this. But here's where he's also brilliant. Here's where Sylvester Stallone is brilliant and really understands things.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Hey, Rick, I'm glad we got out again.
Yeah.
What's going on?
My digital advertising's got more expensive, and it doesn't seem to be working as well.
I see.
Nice drive, by the way.
So?
I don't know how I'm going to keep growing. I feel like I'm going sideways, flattening out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you speak to Steven?
You mean this podcast host?
Yep.
Not yet.
Do you like going sideways?
No. I want to be growing.
Well?
Starter session.
Yep.
5-iron?
Sure. Oh, and you can book your free starter session on this podcast website.
Your turn, Dave.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
He said, great. He said, but here's what I want. I want the lifetime rights to Rocky, and I want this amount of the take forever on any future Rocky movie.
There you go.
And of course, the studio said, sure.
You're nobody. You're going to star in it. It's not going to do very well. There's no second movie.
There's no second movie. There's no food
action
movie.
figure.
There's no action. You can have this. That's fine. It's yours. No problem.
Yeah.
Done. Right? So for almost nothing, he got the rights. Like, think about it. He is one of the few actors in Hollywood who his franchise, Rocky, he owns and controls 100%, not the movie studio.
Yeah. Yeah.
How big is that? Like when you talk about funding his retirement, oh no, the dude's fine. But also the control that this gave him over his career and his livelihood and over Hollywood. It's unheard of. They didn't believe in it. They believed in it enough that they thought if we do this low budget thing, we'll make a little bit of money. He believed in it enough that he said, I'm going to do that thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that thing. And he understood he had the leverage because they didn't believe in it. So what the hell?
Yeah.
But here's where it also gets interesting in terms of this guy understanding, negotiating, and leverage and things along that lines. Remember how he said he sold his dog?
Yeah.
So he gets this money. So he gets an advance on it. And he manages to track down the guy who had his dog. And he said, I want to buy the dog back.
Oh, good.
Now, the initial reaction of the guy who he sold the dog to was, look, anybody who's going to sell their dog doesn't deserve, like I'm a dog lover. Anybody who sells their dog does not deserve to have their dog back. But what he finds out, this guy too wants to get into acting. So he says to him, well, not only will I buy the dog back, I'll give you a role in this movie. So Rocky gives him a role. Sylvester Stallone gives him a role in the movie, and the dog appears actually in the movie. Buttkiss, the dog in the movie, that's his real dog. That's Buttkiss. That's the dog that he sold and got back.
Who's the guy that...
I was never able to track down what his name was and what role he played in it. I only heard, that was one of the things I only heard as a story that I couldn't really confirm, but I believe it to be, I believe it to be true.
Yeah,
I believe this to be one of these things that Tony Robbins heard from.
Well, you've
Sylvester
closed the deal
Stallone.
for me. He got his dog back. That's all I was really worried about from the beginning of the episode.
Got his dog back. Here's the thing that when I heard this story that I really admired about Sylvester Stallone, and it was a couple of things. One is he was going down this path and it wasn't working. And what he didn't do is he didn't give up on it. He said, there's got to be another way to make this work. And so he tried another path.
Yeah.
And there's a greatness in that. There's a greatness in, I'm not giving up on it. I need to have a different strategy to make this happen. Another guy who was like that was Harrison Ford. So
Mm-hmm.
Harrison Ford, when he first became an actor, what he knew is he said, look, it can take a long time to break into Hollywood. So he learned carpentry. And his attitude was, carpentry has got flexibility in time and whatnot. I can pay my bills being a carpenter, which means I can actually hang in there and do this for a long time. There was one point, one of his first roles that he was offered by Steven Spielberg. He initially turned it down because he said, I make more money doing carpentry. This doesn't pay enough. And they ended up matching what he would make doing carpentry, and he got the role. But still, it's that whole idea of, in Harrison Ford's case, this is going to take a long time, so I have to have staying power. In Sylvester Stallone's case, it was, this isn't working. I need to create a new strategy. What can I do? Well, I'm going to write a movie that I star in. And in Sylvester Stallone's case, he did not take his eyes off the prize, right? He could have very easily taken the tact of, I'll take the money and I'll write another movie. But he believed in it and held to his guns.
It's a hero's journey story, whether it's Rocky or Rambo, right? He became the guy that puts those stories together, and people love that story. We'll watch that story all day long.
The other thing that's interesting in the first Rocky, there's two stories. There's the hero's journey story that Rocky Balboa goes through, with an interesting thing where he wins but doesn't win. Like, it's a really interesting outcome because he wins but he actually lost the fight. So it's sort of a really nice, interesting twist, because from the hero's journey standpoint, he still gets the elixir and he still wins and still gets all these rewards, but he actually lost. So that's an interesting plot twist on that storyline. But it's also a love story. It's a story of him and Adrian.
Yeah.
And why they actually love each other, because she sees his gentle side and he's her protector and honors her. Right. And it's actually a very rich, like for somebody who just went out and said, boy, I'm going to study screenwriting, write something. When you actually look at the storyline, it's a very rich story.
Yeah. Well, and you could make the case that the winning came from just getting the fight.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The outcome of the fight doesn't matter so much. The important thing that it does is it sets us up for movie 2.
Right.
Right. The comeback. And that's another hero's journey, right? It's that same loop. And gosh, we talk about this at Wizard Academy. You know, the Chapel Dulcinea sits on a pedestal off of a cliff that's in the shape of a baseball diamond. And Bart Giamatti, when he was the baseball commissioner, talked about baseball being the hero's journey of sports, right? You're not trying to just take territory from the other team. You're setting out on a journey, and your only goal is to get back home again.
Yes. Yeah. It's the only sport which your goal is to return from where you started.
Yeah. And so you see that thread in all the Rocky movies.
Yes.
We love watching that story and hearing that story because that's the story that we're all living.
Yes.
Right. It just resonates in the human heart.
Oh, and you had the mentor, and you had the transformation that goes through, and you had the call to action and the refusal of the call. Like, you have all the elements of that story. And if somebody's interested in learning more about the hero story format, I highly recommend reading Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's also fascinating when you learn how long this story arc has been around, and why it's as powerful as it is. But I just thought, this story to me is so inspiring, and it really did build an empire. Like, Sylvester Stallone built a movie empire, because people go, oh, but it's part of Hollywood. It isn't. He owns it.
Yeah.
It's his.
There's a lot of people that have made a lot of money off of it because of him. Yeah. Amazing story. What about Bullwinkle?
Rocky Bullwinkle? We'll have to look at the Rocky Bullwinkle.
That's a whole different Rocky story.
Yeah, but then we would also have to talk about Boris and Natasha, of course.
Well, thank you for bringing the story of Rocky to the Empire Builders. That's a great one. I love it.
All right, awesome. Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review. And if you have any questions about this or any other podcast episode, email to questions@theempirebuilderspodcast.com.